It's October 11th, 2021. This is Rook. She is one of the most renowned Iranian artists of the current era, with multiple international prizes and trophies earned from different countries around the world. Her art remains forever inspired, she says, by her roots in northern Iran, and she has a big fan in Farah. Vanecha Roudbaraki joins us from Paris later in the show. But first, she is a renowned academic, philosopher, and philanthropist who now has a major role as Senior Vice President of International Affairs for the Anti-Defamation League. Dr. Sharon Nazarian is here for a feature interview. Plus, the Rook Team convenes, and we've got your letters of the week. This is Conversations from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Rook. Hi there, welcome to episode 150 of Rook, the big 150.
That snuck up on us.
Yes, nice to be talking to you. Hope you're keeping well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam Dustan Aziz. Durud Bar Shoma. Happy Thanksgiving if you're in Canada or Canadian. Happy Columbus. Do we say Happy Columbus Day?
Is it Happy Columbus Day or
Yeah.
is just Columbus Day?
I don't know what the position on Columbus is.
There's
now.
only one American in this room right now. We should ask her.
Kian, what do we say? Do we say Happy Columbus Day?
I don't know.
None of us are qualified to know whether we're supposed to be happy or not.
It's Columbus Day.
It's
so
Columbus
I would
Day in the
imagine
U.S.
You say happy.
Well,
Columbus
how about hello, Americans? It's Columbus Day. Be happy. Let's do it that way.
That'll work.
Speaking of Americans, an Iranian-American, Dr. Sharon Nazarian, grew up in Tehran, came to California after the revolution. Now the VP of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, monitoring and combating racial hatred and incidents of anti-Semitism around the world. Cannot be an easy gig, let's face it. She's also a mother of three and a popular public speaker. She will join us from Los Angeles in a few minutes. In about an hour, Vanecha Roudbaraki joins us from Paris, a very successful Iranian artist who uses nature and her mathematics background in her works. Shaya?
Interesting.
She's got a big fan, as I mentioned in the intro bills there, in Farah, who, and her work is really quite spectacular, Vanecha's work. I'm very much looking forward to speaking to her. Hello, the fabulous Kian.
Hi, Jian.
Hello, Captain Reza.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Groovy Shaya.
Hi, Azza.
Nice to see you guys. We launched the Contemporary History of Iran, our new series, this past Thursday. It was part one of the series, From Shahyad to Azadi. So it's just me talking to a smart person
As opposed
to the you three. No, I didn't mean it that way, but I miss you guys when we do that show.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Happy Columbus Day.
So much love in this room on a national holiday.
I listen. The love should be for the turkeys who get a raw deal on this day. So our first episode there was From Shahyad to Azadi, which was about the morphing. Is about the morphing of the Shahyad Tower, the Maidan Shahyad, into the Maidan Azadi after the revolution, and how a symbol, a monument of one era can become a symbol of another, virtually overnight. And that episode is doing really well. I'm really happy to see that. We'd love you to spread the word. If you haven't checked it out already, The Contemporary History of Iran, it's on our Rook platforms. This Thursday, The Americans and the 53 Coup is the title of this Thursday's episode. Now, I know we mentioned this last week, but I've been getting a bunch of comments on this. The music for the contemporary history of Iran.
Solid.
Phenomenal.
Written by our very own David Foster, our very own Quincy Jones. Shaya has taken the Rook theme and done a variation of it for the contemporary history of Iran, and it's so good. It's playing in my head all the time. You know, it's. Shaya, do you want to play us a bit of that? Will you?
Sure.
This
Avec
is-
plaisir.
Okay. I see this is the intro part, and here it goes. It's got this it's like a mystery series, Shai.
History.
Big payoff. I love that. Isn't that good?
So
It's like
good.
a
So
Game
good.
of Thrones-esque.
Totally
type
Game of
vibe.
Thrones, like some new HBO series.
Yeah. Who's doing the strings?
Shia hired at least what is it? Was it about
orchestra
35
of-
musicians to do all that.
It's amazing.
I think it's all Shia, right? You play all the parts.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could record it with a actual player, but it's just VSTs and plugins.
beautiful.
Yeah, really nicely done.
Thank you.
Anyway, the contemporary history of Iran Thursdays, our regular Rook shows on Mondays, like this one. I saw a new morning consult study. That's a pollster that came out this weekend, and I thought this was really interesting. Do you know, when surveyed, how many Americans could find Iran on a map? Like, what percentage of Americans could find Iran? A country that obviously has been in the news, is constantly in the news in the United States. You know, has there was the saber rattling with Donald Trump. There's the, well, are we going to do a new Iran deal? I mean, it's not a country that it doesn't get spoken about.
Yeah.
So what percentage of Americans do you think could find Iran on a map? And this is like, it could even get in the general vicinity of Iran when pointing on a map.
I'm gonna go based on my own personal experience, since my cousins are Americans and they can barely locate their own state on the map. I'm gonna say 15%.
15.
I was
Yeah.
going to say
Wow.
the same.
It's very
Yeah.
low. That's very low.
It's going to be a very depressing answer, I imagine.
It's 28%.
Oh,
Okay.
better than I
Oh,
expected.
better, yeah.
I like how
Bad.
we think that's great.
Yeah.
Almost a third of
Well-
Americans. Yeah.
For some reason, geography is not like
No,
an
it's not
American
their
strong
thing.
suit. I've seen videos of people trying to ask them, like, where's Argentina? And they point to Asia.
Now it tends to be insular, the education system in your country of the states, Keon. Now, how many Iranians do you think could point out the United States on
I'd
a
say
map?
probably 99%.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the ones in the villages, you think, Shia?
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah, probably.
think?
Omriko, it is here.
Yeah.
That is where we. Yeah.
Shady.
دیگه این تهشه دیگه. This is the end, right? That's where we go.
85%.
You think 85? Well, no, I don't have those
Oh, you don't have
stats.
the
No,
number? Okay.
I'm just,
Damn, it was a fun game,
numbers.
Gian. You have to ruin
I just have
everything.
the one
Yeah,
statistic.
you were right.
Well, I mean, what did you say? 99%?
I said
95%?
90%. Probably 90%.
If you are listening and you're in Iran and you cannot locate America on a map, please tell us so we know which
Yell at
percentage you
Captain
are.
Reza.
We're coming to you on rookmedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms. We're on an ongoing mission to build a new audiovisual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and CastBox. If you'd like to see some visuals, switch over to YouTube. And if you like your Rook descriptions and bulletins in English and Farsi, check us out on Telegram. How many Canadians do you think could identify Iran?
More than Americans.
I
for
think so
sure.
too.
Yeah.
I think so too. And it's not to say that Americans or Canadians are better, although
No, we are.
it's no, it's
But-
not.
but
It's
it-
not to say that. It's just that Canadians, we in general, because we're a smaller country and not in size, of course, but in population and
Yeah.
in strength and all of that, we just tend to have more of a global sense. I think Canadians
Yeah.
generally know more about the world as a product of having to know more about the
Right.
world than Americans.
It's the public education system. Like, my relatives in the U.S. have told me this. Like, you guys have a better public education system. It's a fact, and I think that's part of it.
KeonNadami at gmail.com is where you write if you're an American
It's true,
taking
no,
umbrage.
really,
It's, no, I don't
Listen,
know what
I'm American and Canadian.
you can
so
say
I
that. That's right.
yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's true, though. I mean, I still think 28% is a depressing number.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're right. I mean, when we hear surveys about, 40% of Americans believe that the aliens are real or whatever those things are, that it's maybe you put that into context. Hey, big thanks to Farid Ameryoun and York National Realty for helping to bring this episode of Rook to your ears and eyes. York National Realty, a boutique real estate company based in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. Can you point that out on a map, Keon?
I probably cannot, actually.
How many Keons can point out an Aurora? Listen, York National Realty provides top-tier service with its team of Farid, Sean Fadavi, and Nahal Sultani. They're a full-service realty firm that are there for everyone from first-time home buyers to investors looking for new opportunities in the communities they serve. Farid and his team have made it their mission to give back to the Iranian community in the diaspora and supported a number of Persian community events and projects. If you are looking for real estate, this boutique firm is where you should go. They provide personal service with flair and great attention. Try them out for all your real estate needs. Thank you to Farid, Sean, and Nahal. York National Realty. Go to yorknational.com. yorknational.com. Now, have you ever noticed that Iranians, they don't, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but they can't just give you a compliment. There always has to be some critical assessment that comes with it. But there's a Persian's compliment, and then there's like an attack, So it's like, Jian, ma عاشق شما هستیم. یکمی توپلی شدیم. Like it's like that, right? Like
it's like a compliment sandwich between two.
That's right. We're your fan, but have you gotten fat? Yeah. So Persians compliment and then attack. So yesterday, Thanksgiving weekend, I went to this lunch at this restaurant. I was invited to the Gilane. It's a restaurant we have in Toronto. It's a very nice Persian restaurant. So a man comes up and like only Persians like on a Thanksgiving Sunday would dress up in a suit jacket to go to get some kebab, but and he's got the jacket and I don't know, older guy maybe, and he says, this is an absolute true story. Jian John, your program is very good. The Rook, excellent, mashallah. But Bebin, you need the facts. And I was like, okay. And then he said, your friends, I think he means you guys. He said, your friends do not have the facts. And I was like, is this about something in particular? And I'm asking him, and he just keeps going, no. But it's good, but your friends do not have the facts. You need the facts.
He just doesn't like us, I think.
He just couldn't say. He couldn't stop at your program is nice. I enjoy. You need the facts.
You need the facts. So Jian, does that mean that you don't fact check anything?
I don't know what it means. I couldn't. I guess
you mean saying hello needs to be fact checked?
I think he meant like we, when we're talking about Iran, we're because we speak anecdotally, right? Yeah, we give opinions, and we don't. We're not listing off statistics or something. I don't know.
This is famous with Iranians. If someone goes against their opinion, they don't like you.
Yeah, you don't have the facts.
They will. Yeah, exactly. They don't like. I don't know. This is my experience. Like you can't have a polite debate with a lot of Iranians.
Yeah.
And if that guy was wearing a tie as well, then
he wasn't wearing a tie.
Believes in one fact.
No, he wasn't wearing a tie, but he was wearing a jacket. And he was Jian, your program is very good, excellent, but baby, you need your friends do not have the facts.
My friends do not have the facts.
And I was like, no, they're not my friends. They're just people. I don't know them.
Oh my!
My friends would have the facts. I swear. All right, so we have some letters.
Yeah, it's on our inaugural episode of Contemporary History of Iran.
All right, we will get to the letters, and we've got Vanecha Roudbaraki coming up. But let's get to our first feature guest. My first guest today is an Iranian-American social activist, academic, and philanthropist. Dr. Sharon Nazarian is the president of the Y&S Nazarian Family Foundation and the founder of the Yunus and Soraya Nazarian Center for Israel Studies at UCLA. She also teaches as an adjunct professor at UCLA in the Department of Political Science and has focused on education and public policy in her journey towards seeing the world through a philanthropic anthropic perspective. Sharon was born in Tehran, where she spent the first 10 years of her life before fleeing with her family in the midst of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. They immigrated to the United States, settling in Beverly Hills, California. That's Sharon and her parents and siblings. She went on to receive her master's and doctorate of philosophy degrees from USC in the field of political science, specializing in political economy and economic development in newly industrialized countries. In 2017, the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, appointed Sharon as Senior Vice President of International Affairs. These days, Sharon heads the ADL's work fighting anti-Semitism and racial hatred globally, and also oversees the ADL's Israel office, as well as overseeing 3 kids. And right now, Dr. Sharon Nazarian joins us from Los Angeles, California today. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Very nice to have you on the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
You know, I want to ask you about your journey, about being a Jewish Iranian-American, about the state of the world. But first, I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking about what it must be like to be overseeing a portfolio that is about combating anti-Semitism and hatred, and thinking that's a lot to be dealing with day to day. Do you have a way of not letting the negative news, which is so clearly, obviously universal from day to day, or the reality of the world, that is, get you down?
Actually, it's such a wonderful question to start on, because I'm asked that question quite often. And first of all, it's such a pleasure to be with you and your listeners today. And given the amazing work that you do every day, it's really my honor to be with you. I wake up every morning at 5 a.m. Looking at a briefing of all the worst incidents of hate that have taken place around the globe. And many ask me, how do you get out of bed every morning? That must be so depressing. It must be so, really putting such a dark light on the work that you do every day. And I said, actually, in fact, what it does for me, and I guess it depends kind of on your personality type, what it is, it's the engine that actually moves me. And knowing that an organization like ADL exists, that I'm a part of its executive team, that we make decisions that actually have impact, all of that energizes me on a daily basis. And hopefully that's the right mix and makeup to have positions like this. It's not easy.
I mean, we'll get into the details of this, but it's got to feel on some level like combat. Like, every day you're going to battle. And I mean, for some people, for me, social media can even just feel like that, let alone having to get the briefings in the morning and actually deal with the things that some of us can choose to ignore sometimes in the news. Some people turn off their Twitter feed for a day or just choose to not deal with it. Do you have days where you just say, I cannot hear about hatred and anti-Semitism today?
Unfortunately, I don't have that luxury. It is a task, but it's a commitment. And I can tell you that every single staff person at ADL comes to ADL because of its mission. We're all mission driven. It does take a certain personality type to be doing this work. And hopefully now I'm in my 4th year. I just had my 4th anniversary at ADL. And I think everything that you kind of cited in my CV, all of that I do believe has kind of led me to this moment where, both in terms of my own career path that brought me to ADL, but in terms of where the world is. There couldn't be more important work, in my view, that I could be doing right now, and I feel really privileged.
I was going to ask you about what you just described as your evolution. That did it feel like a natural evolution for you to go from teaching public policy to being part of influencing public policy?
It really, really did. And the 3 buckets that you mentioned of my kind of career work, academia, philanthropy, and foreign policy, at some points in my life kind of felt very disjointed, like they were all my passions, but they did not always intersect in organic ways. But once I was tapped for this position at ADL, it all made sense to me. And I use the skill sets, the network, the knowledge that I acquired from all 3 worlds that I was in before ADL in my work today, every single day, whether it's my diplomacy work where I'm engaging with foreign ministers and ambassadors about what's happening in their country, whether it's my addressing major global forums on rising hate and anti-Semitism. So my academic experience comes into play there, or whether it's just about what it means to build and to create new tools and solutions to what we're facing. So my philanthropic work of building new institutions, building programmatic offerings, all of that has really helped me in my position today. I'm standing on the shoulders of all my predecessors who brought ADL to where it is today, but to make sure that we're relevant, to make sure that we have not lost sight of the mission of the organization that was established over 100 years ago. My background really has enabled me to be a key executive in this mission. Right. And hopefully move our work forward.
It's not just your background, of course, as an academic and your background as a philanthropist and your background in foreign policy, but it's also your background as a Jewish kid who was growing up in Iran and saw anti-Semitism up front there. Not that it wasn't happening in other places as well, but I want to ask you about that. I want you to take me back. We'll come back to the state of the world today, but I want to ask a bit about your life and being a Jewish kid in Iran before the revolution. I also know you're a professor, so you'll forgive me if I ask you to give us a history lesson of sorts here. If you can do this with any kind of, in a brief sense, if you can give us an overview. Sure. Jews have been in Iran. I know this for over 2,000 years. It's not like this is a 20th century thing that there were Jewish Iranians. What can you tell us about the history of Jews in Iran?
So Jews actually can document our existence in Persian Empire going back to the Babylonian times, so 2,700 years. We're considered one of the oldest Jewish communities existing in existence today in the world. And for those familiar with kind of Jewish cultural identity, Iranian Jews are neither Ashkenazi, which means Jews of European descent, nor Sephardic. Sephardic Jews are of Spanish descent, right, as a result of the Spanish Inquisition. So we are one of those few communities around the world.
I thought you had to be one or the other. Yeah.
No, you don't actually. So Iranian Jews are unique in that we are considered, if there is a label to put on Iranian Jews, in Hebrew it's Mizrahi, which means Eastern Jews. So right. Jews of Eastern descent, because we did not come from Spain, and so we don't have the Spanish heritage. Of course, there are Iranian Jews who are of Spanish descent, but there are those who literally can link their heritage back thousands of years to having been in Iran for that long. Just to, in a very short form, the history of Jews in Iran has been a very mixed one, where there have been periods of huge tolerance, great integration, where Jews have held important posts in previous Iranian governments, have been important advisors to kings through different dynasties. But there's definitely been periods of huge pain, huge oppression, pogroms, killings, discriminatory laws that have segregated Jews. And up until the 1920s and 30s, when, for example, my father was born in 1931, there were not only ghettos called mahalle in many of the main Iranian cities like Tehran and Isfahan and Shiraz, but there were also actual legislation and rules that segregated Jews from participating in daily life in Iran. Anything from holding major positions to attending university to participating in any sort of major business transactions, government grants, government projects. My father went on to become a major infrastructure developer. He did road and highways and sewage systems. And for many, many years, as he was growing his business, he was not privy to many government projects because he was Jewish. So the reality of his life definitely started one with systemic anti-Semitism in Iran. And as my generation, my siblings were born, definitely Iran and the Shah moved toward a much more tolerant, protective system of protecting all religious minorities, obviously not just Jews, but Armenians and Baha'is and others. And by the time of the revolution and up until the revolution, there was really a sense of a period of real enlightenment and kind of a golden era for minorities in Iran, where they were able to participate in all forms and all aspects of life in Iran, business, government. We had a representative of the community to the parliament. So the revolution really took away all of that. And so, as I said, overall speaking, it was a very mixed history. And I think many Iranians don't know about that. They don't know that there was really those periods of great tolerance and also periods of great oppression. So sadly, that is a history.
How would you characterize your own time growing up as a kid in Iran in the 1970s? What comes to mind when somebody says, what was Sharon like at 5 years old?
So I definitely benefited from kind of that final period of Shah's rule, that there was really a sense of protection and tolerance for Jews. I attended a Jewish day school along with my siblings, right across from the Tehran University. I felt that, in terms of my family, we had moved to parts of the city that were not overly Jewish. So my parents felt safe and comfortable enough to move into neighborhoods that were primarily non-Jewish, and yet they felt welcome to do that in more prominent neighborhoods. Our lives were very comfortable, and my father's business success allowed us to travel and to have a really high quality lifestyle. But still, I have to tell you that, and many minorities will tell you, that we felt like a minority every single day. So part of the cultural lessons that we got from our parents, in very subtle ways, were taught how to speak in front of non-Jews, how to behave in front of non-Jews. When we had, let's say we went to our neighbor's home that were not Jewish, what we were able to say, what we were able to do, what we were able to eat and not eat. So the behavior, there was some of these kind of code switching, as we call it now in today's parlance, that as minorities, that again, I don't think it's just the Jewish minorities of Iran, but many minorities felt that there had to be a certain level of safety, care in how we behaved.
Sorry, what do you mean how to speak? What would you need to say or not say?
I think some of the very obvious, again, what I'm calling code switching, but subtle messaging was, again, most minorities, if you've been a minority in a majority society, you will understand this. And I think perhaps all of us now in the diaspora, in the Iranian diaspora today, feel that as being now a minority in the
We've got
majority
practice of being minorities.
Exactly. Coming from a heritage of anti-Semitism, we were taught, and we essentially, not overtly, but learned from our parents' language, from our parents' behavior, how you behave as a minority community. And so whether it's the kind of reverence and respect you gave when you were with non-Muslims, the care you took in how you spoke, again, very subtle, very symbolic, very not overtly addressed, but more than anything modeled and taught by parents and handed to children from generation to generation. So when we talk about kind of generational trauma, if you want to, and I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but there's definitely those kind of cues that are handed from one generation to the next, even though, again, as I mentioned, the trends towards minorities was a positive one up until the revolution. It was definitely one of acceptance, more of tolerance. But despite those trends, there was always kind of a fear of stepping out of line, of being called a bad Jew, being called derogatory terms, which were not, they were there in daily life. Those terms were there.
Tell me about the exodus of 1979. What was the breaking point, if you will? What was the precipitant for your dad, for your family? Your mom was a sculptor. You have these siblings. What was the moment where the decision was made that you have to get out of Tehran?
For us, it was really the beginning of the demonstrations and especially the violent demonstrations. I have very clear memories of being driven to school in the morning by my father, and he taught me. He said, Sharon, if you're in the car and the car gets attacked, you need to kind of scoot under and cover your head. If you're sitting at school in your classroom and you don't sit by the window because they might be throwing rocks at you. So this was still in 1978. This is before the Shah left. And I remember my parents having conversations at night, talking about the uncertainty of the future. My father was, very close friends with the Israeli ambassador at the time in Tehran. And I remember conversations with him where he would warn us, and he actually told us that we don't really know what the future will be of this government and how long the Shah will last. There was a lot of talk about uncertainty, and that's when my father, who had a history of, he went to Israel in 1948 after the establishment of the State of Israel, kind of found himself there as a young adult and came back to Iran when Iran's economy and the oil boom took off. So he always felt that, if in case of insecurity, we had a second home to go to, and my grandparents lived in Israel. So that's where my father decided to move the family to Israel first. And after that, recognizing, with the hope of coming back, by the way, my father was, most Jews and I think other minorities who left Iran. Iran is our home. Iran is our land where we were all born. The thought was we're going to come back, just like in the 50s, the Shah abdicated and came back. We were not ready to give up on our homeland. But after about a year, my father saw that staying in Israel was even more complicating in terms of our affairs in Iran, and we moved to Los Angeles then.
I was going to say, when I heard the story that for a while you guys sort of are in Israel, you're squatting there as your father thinks we're going to return to Iran. This revolution thing might pass, like 1953, et cetera, or whatever. We'll go back. I thought that was interesting because, as you say, your dad was born in Iran in 1931. I know he's still around. That's fabulous. Yes, but that, it wasn't always easy. When you talk about ghettos and pogroms and discrimination and all of that, and yet the fact that the first instinct is we're going to return suggests he really first and foremost saw himself as an Iranian. Yes?
Absolutely. No, all Iranian Jews feel that way. If you look at the diaspora homes of Iranians around the world, Iranian Jewish families around the world, the prevalence of Farsi in second, third generation language, the prevalence of not only our food and music and the cultural, heritage that we have is so rich and is so deep. All Iranian Jews are Iranian first. And that's it. That's who we are. That's our identity. And there's no questioning of that. The fact that we have a spiritual home in Israel, and given that Israel was created in many reasons, not only because we've had obviously a tie to the land since the beginning of time, but after World War II, it became a refuge for so many Jews who fled and survived kind of World War II. It is just, it kind of points to the reality of many minorities who feel that while, of course, they're citizens of their homeland, as minorities, there's always danger. There's always a feeling, kind of in the bottom of your gut of insecurity that you could be targeted. And so I think, again, not just Jews, but all Iranian minorities. Look at the Baha'i community. They have probably faced the most amount of repression since the revolution, and the targeting and killing of the Baha'i community has just been outrageous over the last 40 years, and the kind of life that they need to have in Iran today. Literally living underground and having underground schools and universities. And it's just really outrageous, the treatment of that minority community. But again, it's a dynamic of living in illiberal societies that are non-democratic. And in those societies, minorities are the most vulnerable. And they get blamed first, they get targeted first for whatever insecurities and anxieties societies feel. And Jews were no different throughout our history, and including as part of the revolution as well.
What was coming to America like for you?
It was 2 rounds of drastic change for me in 2 years. So when we went to Israel, I did attend school there. So I learned Hebrew. I adapted to school life in Israel, and then we had to pick up again and then come to Los Angeles. once we landed in Beverly Hills, the hostage crisis took place. So for all of us, that was such a painful time.
Yep.
Where on one hand we had fled our homes and left everything behind, on another hand we were blamed for the American hostages being taken.
Yeah.
So it was painful. I remember as a 10, 11-year-old, really feeling, what we use today, the bullying that happens in schools. So it was difficult. It was difficult. But for me, because our home life and my parents created so much love and safety in our home, I really just felt so blessed. And I have parents who, for whatever reason, I really can't really explain it, we never had dialogue in the home about everything that was lost. It was never about crying and being depressed about everything that we lost, especially our material things that we had. So my parents were very forward-looking, and the minute we landed, it was all about reestablishing our life, our home, school for us, and just moving forward. So I think the resilience that I hold today, I think as an adult, a lot of it is owed to those changes that came early on in my life, like all of us felt, all refugees who have to leave their home and find new homes. It creates a certain resilience. And I tell my kids every day, I'm like, I worry about you guys because you just haven't had the kinds of hardship. And I hope that you have the resilience that, what life will bring you. Hopefully you will not have difficulties. But refugees and immigrants, we're a sturdy bunch. We have strength in our ways because we've had to move and reestablish ourselves in ways that others who haven't don't have those muscles.
Absolutely. Although every generation thinks that the generation after them has it easier, right? There's the old Monty Python sketch where where it's like, in my day we used to get up in the morning, clean the lake, with our tongues,
go through snow and trudge through snow. Yes, no doubt. No, I think I'm just talking about a kind of a refugee or immigrant experience.
Absolutely,
I think that is a unique experience.
Others
have hardship, no doubt.
I have my father's name tattooed on my arm in Farsi because I believe that the pioneering role he took in emigrating, leaving one side of the world to go to the other. By the way, in a period like your parents and you, where you couldn't get on Facebook and chat with your friends as soon as you land, back home, you're in a new place and you can only make a phone call maybe once a month or write a letter or something like that. I just will never, me and certainly future generations would never even be able to understand how to experience that because these were pioneers, our parents,
Absolutely.
You do something interesting, which is you go, most middle class kids or kids with some resources or upper class kids, they, especially Iranians, as you know, go into our streamed into medicine or engineering or something like that if they're going to go into academia, and that goes for boys and girls, but especially for a woman to go into political science and be into foreign policy. Where did that happen for you?
Probably from my home and from the reality of our lives. I was very much immersed in our family life where politics and awareness, and we feel the difference now. You're in Canada, I'm in the US. These large countries are kind of inward looking, but what we do notice that when you come from smaller countries, not that Iran is small, but countries that are more connected or more dependent on regional and international activities, there is more sense of the need for awareness and knowing what's going on in the world. So my home was like that with my father. Our home was very open to businessmen from around the world. My father was in the business that, he did a lot of work with European companies, as I said, with Israeli companies. So our home was a very international home where my father spoke many languages. We had people come in and go through our house as they were visiting Tehran. And as a child, I think I was very interested in the world around me. And I think politics coming to America, the Iranian Revolution, left its print on me. I remember having dreams about, interviewing Ayatollah Khomeini and saying, what is your plan here? What are you trying to do to this country? And so as a child, and I did my undergrad in journalism and international relations, thinking that I'm going to be a foreign correspondent. and as I learned and studied more, political science really became my passion of answering the questions that I had as a child, kind of answering the whys, and trying to really kind of put my arms around some of the theoretical basis for the makeup of our societies, and where is the world headed. So, and I just love learning as well. I have to say, I was not keen to leave the university once I got my undergraduate degree. It was such a period of kind of flourishing for me and blossoming and going all the way to get my PhD without really a plan. I didn't know if I wanted to be an academic and teach full time. It was really about the discovery that was very important to me and I was very committed to. And once I finished my PhD, really teaching became one of the first avenues for me to impart some of my knowledge. And I really loved that. I started at USC, and then I switched over to UCLA, where, as you mentioned, I established a center. Teaching is I think, is the ultimate form of service, and I really believe in it. And up until ADL, that's kind of where I felt like my commitment was.
So tell me about that, the ADL, because you do some interesting things. You're teaching, you're involved, you've got these foundations, you're involved in philanthropy. You produce a movie called Baba June. You've done a couple of movies, but that one that we've talked about actually on the show with Navid Negahban.
Oh, good.
It's a very interesting film, actually. And so in 2017, when the ADL comes to you, the Anti-Defamation League comes to you and says, we want you to become an executive. Was it obvious to you that you would say yes, or did you?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Actually, the way this pivot to ADL happened was really out of left field for me. I had not been involved in any work relating to anti-Semitism. That's not my area of expertise. That's not even where our family foundation was focused on. Our CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, and his wife, Marjan Greenblatt, who is also Iranian-American, we knew of each other socially a bit. We had served on some boards together. Jonathan had served in the Obama White House. He was the first kind of director of the Office of Innovation for the Obama White House. So I'd met him when I went as a delegation of Iranian-American leaders to the White House, where President Obama had invited us. So I met Jonathan then, before he came on to kind of lead the ADL. So when we, for the first time, talked about ADL, was more as a kind of a social setting, and he was telling me about kind of what his vision for ADL was, and he mentioned that one of his few executive spots that were still open on his executive team was the senior vice president for international, and he was asking my husband and I about kind of whether we had any thoughts on who would be a good candidate. But what happened was literally 2 weeks after that get together, Charlottesville happened. For those of you, your listeners, I'm sure you all remember that horrific march by kind of alt-right, mostly men, but also women who, spewed really hateful.
What was that chant about Jews will
not replace us.
Will not replace
Jews,
us, yeah.
Yes. So sitting in front of the TV that day, watching that with my husband, and my husband is an immigrant as well. He's from Argentina. Both of us sitting with our mouths open, just not believing what we were seeing. How could this be possible? Right near our nation's capital. And, ADL's history was one where, the KKK was such a point of focus for the ADL. ADL was instrumental, for example, passing legislation that made hood wearing, like mask and hood wearing of the KKK, illegal. So we've been very instrumental in kind of addressing the white supremacist movements in America throughout its history. But to see these men not even covering their face, not even feeling the need to, like there was no shame in what they were saying, holding those tiki torches.
Yeah.
And all of us, again, those of us who had to flee our countries, our homeland, and come to this country for refuge and to feel safe, to sit there and to say, who are these people and what are they saying? And how does it affected me in such a deep way? And I said to my husband, my husband said, Sharon, what more important work can you been doing than fighting that? And I thought about my father as you did. I said, my father brought us here to make sure that we're safe and that we won't be targeted again. And here it is, this threat right in front of me on my TV station. And that was a turning point in my life. That's when Jonathan reached out to me again and said, Sharon, I think you'd be great for this post. And I said, are you sure? I mean, this is really not my area of expertise. Like, no, it's your background. It's who you are as an Iranian, as an Iranian-American woman, as someone who understands what it means to be in a minority community, because that's what this job entails, looking around the world and looking at vulnerable communities. You know what that looks like, you know what it feels like. And it was such a culmination of, like, as I said before, everything in my past coming together and preparing me for that moment of accepting this important role. And, the rest is history. That was definitely a turning point for me, though. I think many of us felt that way.
Sharon, let me ask you about the work you do now and the state of the world from your perspective. And let's start with anti-Semitism. I mean, the current analysis by most informed people would be to say that there's been a rise in nationalism around the world. There's been a rise in xenophobia and white supremacy in recent years. You mentioned Charlottesville, and that has led to an increase in anti-Semitism around the world. Do you agree? Is that the
Absolutely. Our data shows that. ADL has been keeping probably the most reliable data on anti-Semitic incidents, so actual acts of what we call anti-Semitic incidents. That could be anything from, going and scrawling things on the walls of synagogues, whether it's a swastika. It could be anything, then from there going up into more acts of intimidation and acts of violence. All of those we capture on an annual audit every year. And we are, along with the FBI, FBI does more of a broad hate crime statistics. So all forms of crime that are considered hate crimes. Our statistics is more specifically to measuring anti-Semitic acts. And then we have a whole other index now, a tool for measuring online hate as well. So the trends that we are now measuring really definitely point to unprecedented rise, both in physical anti-Semitic incidents as well as online rise in online hate. Again, both anti-Semitic, but broadly speaking, especially online, is broad online use of hate language, intimidation, and so on.
I mean, obviously, it begs the question, why? We had recently Dr. Fateli Moghadam on, who's the psychologist and writer who's written extensively about dictatorships and authoritarianism, and he was saying, sadly, his analysis is that the world is sliding backwards into authoritarianism in various parts of the world, including the West, in his opinion. I would imagine that that's not disconnected from a rise in hate and anti-Semitism. But what is your sense of why this is happening?
I mean, the way we see it at ADL, first of all, is that anti-Semitism is a canary in the coal mine. So when we talk about any society, especially liberal democratic societies, when anti-Semitic incidents go up, it is more a telling indicator for the backsliding of democratic societies away from freedom, protection, tolerance, and democratic values. So it's very important for all of us to understand that the reason, the focus on anti-Semitism has become so important. It's not just for the sake of the Jews, but it's more telling indicator for the health of any society.
Right.
Because we have, over 2,000 years of experience, unfortunately and sadly, it is a very telling indicator. So that's number one. Number two, you pointed to a lot of the factors that we think are also very, very important. For example, mass movement of people. When you have mass migration, whether it's due to wars, as we saw, for example, with Syria and Iraq, and now with Afghanistan, mass movement of people leads to xenophobia. Societies where they see the other coming in leads to anxieties and insecurities. So that's for sure a huge factor. And we've seen really an upsurge in movement of people, whether it's for political, economic, war reasons or whatever. Secondarily, kind of this rise in populism. And again, you referenced that, both on the extreme right, on the left, and then even Islamist, I would say, ideology, like groups like ISIS and others, who really tap into social anxieties that is prevalent globally. These are global trends and has nothing specifically to do with anti-Semitism, but we do see that the rise in populist movements, and Europe is kind of, for me and my group, my team, is the focal point of our work, because we see this triple threat playing out at the same time, and influencing one another. So in Europe, for example, you see the far right not only gaining traction and breaking taboos, historical taboos where they were kept out of the political arena, now coming in, being part of political coalitions, getting much higher votes, that then influencing the far left. And the far left movement, like, for example, in the UK with the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn, and the language of bringing socialism into it, but really going more of an anti-colonial, anti-Western ideology that is very extreme and intolerant in its own way. And then put in the mix is like the Islamist extremism of the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood in many ways in Europe, and Hamas and Hezbollah, and all of this, really creates a perfect storm in a region like Europe with the history that it has. And when we look at then anti-Semitic incidents, like shooting through the roof, it's really about all of these affecting one another. So I'll give you a very specific example. In Europe, there's a lot of legislation now targeting whether it's access to kosher and halal meat, or it's about circumcision for male babies. A lot of this kind of legislation is targeting Muslims in Europe, right? It's right-wing legislators and those who want to limit and minimize Muslim life in Europe. But of course, it affects Jews and affects Jewish life in Europe. Then you have kind of left-wing extremists who are either they're environmentalists, or they believe in kind of the freedom of the child to choose, a lot of different motivations coming in hand, supporting such legislation. And so you have the far right and the far left coming together in very strange, bedfellows, pushing for legislation that is really taking away religious rights and rights of religious minorities to practice their faith and live according to their faith. So
but the strange bedfellows then also exist if the ADL supports the rights of people to preside with circumcision, then you're allying yourself with Muslims as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And look, we, as I said, we are an anti-hate organization. We advocate on behalf of all minorities who are discriminated against. And we advocate on behalf of Muslims. Like when the Muslim ban took place in the US under the Trump administration, we were the first. I mean, our CEO was the first one to say, if there's going to be a Muslim registry, I'm going to put my name on it. So ADL has a very long history on that.
I'm really glad that you mentioned the canary in the coal mine, because I feel like, especially for Iranians, I remember when the Black Lives Matter protests were at their zenith last year, and we had a couple of people on the show come and say, this is important for us as Iranians to be part of this. We're also people of color. We're also minorities, and we got a bunch of pushback, from the audience. People saying, we're not black people. We're not, and even the idea of being minorities is difficult for some Iranians, and you kind of think, at the end of the day, the white supremacist is not going to separate us out of the pack. As Vanecha Roudbaraki has said on this program when she was talking about how hard she was working after the Patriot Act after 9/11. When in those jail cells, when they were rounding up people, they weren't sort of discerning which one's the Iraqi and which one's the Iranian and which one's the Jewish guy. They were just putting them all in the cell. If they're coming for them, they're coming for us too, right? Absolutely. And so it's so important. And I don't know how you work to impress that kind of idea on so-called non-believers, if you will, say even in our community, in the Iranian community.
I think the kind of the issues of identity became really fascinating during kind of the post-George Floyd and the kind of the BLM movement. It was fascinating, and I think it was very generationally interesting. Even in my home, I have 3 children, as you mentioned. My eldest, are in their 20s. And we had really interesting dinner conversations about how we self-identify. And, my daughters, for the first time, told me we consider ourselves, people of color. And that term, or, to be a brown person, those were terminology that I hadn't used about myself, but they made me think about it. I said, what? Yes, we are. Of course we are. And as an Iranian-American, that's been the term that I self-reference, and the way I identify myself, that I'm an Iranian-American. But where do we fit in into this mix? And where are we in terms of our rights as a minority community? Where is our voice being represented? Who is speaking for us? It was fascinating to see that so many Iranians kind of saw themselves as white.
Yeah.
And whether that was a socioeconomic reference, because thankfully many are well-to-do and many do live in neighborhoods, with affluence. Was it is it a political reference, with, affiliation with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? But we didn't really think about the race issue and ethnic issue and how do we fit in. So these were, a lot of it was first-time conversations. So we have to be patient with ourselves and I think hopefully with kindness and respect, have these difficult, thorny conversations, because we are, it's been 40 years, more than 40 years since our revolution, but we're still new at this. And to be immersed into kind of the complexity of anti-racist movements in America and the history of slavery in this country and how do we fit into all of that is complicated. And we need time to kind of delve into it. Hopefully we come to it with open eyes and we come to it from a place of learning and curiosity and not racism, because we did see that. And unfortunately, in many of our communities, there was a very strong reaction to the BLM protests and vilifying many of the protesters who were nonviolent. I mean, of course, there was violence in some of the protests as well. But some of it left kind of a bad taste in my mouth in terms of what I saw some of our community members depict those marches, not really having an understanding of what is it reflecting, what kind of history, what is the history of slavery in this country, of institutional racism in this country. Why is there this fear of law enforcement and police? And we have to come to all these realities with open eyes and kind of an open heart, and then figure out our own place in it and what is our, hopefully, additive and what is our contribution. And it makes me so happy when I see members of our community kind of getting into public life, running for office. That's a place where I feel our community has kind of been a little bit lacking. When I see young Iranian-Americans kind of really vie for that kind of public service, it makes me really happy. And it forces some of these questions on us. How do we self-identify? And of course, we all as individuals can do that. But as a community also, where do we show up? Where do we show up as allies? Where do we show up in coalitions to not only promote our own self-interest, but to make our communities as a whole better? And ADL does a lot of that. A lot of our work is about coalition building, about allyship, and about showing up for others.
I really appreciate the time that you've given us today. Let me end off where we started, which is I was asking you about how you cope with. You talked about getting up every morning and getting the briefings about incidents of anti-Semitism and hate crimes around the world, and how you even deal with that emotionally and psychologically. And I always say this, but I tend to think that people who do the kind of work that you do, people who are active, people who are activists, ultimately have to be optimists, because if you didn't believe that change can come, if you didn't believe that good things can come, you wouldn't be doing the work that you do. So are you optimistic about how we get out of this in a world that seems so full of toxicity and hate at present?
I believe in the human spirit. I believe in our abilities to use innovation and creativity and also humanity to come together. I really, truly, truly, truly believe in that. And as difficult as this moment is, and we can't close our eyes to the reality of what our society globally is going through. And again, this is not just a local issue. It's not an American issue. It's truly a global moment where we're at the precipice of feeling something, really big and very uncomfortable for all of us and anxiety provoking. But I do believe, looking at, and we're all students of history, hopefully, humanity has survived very difficult periods and some really dark periods. This feels a bit of a dark moment for us. But I do believe in the resilience of human spirit. And I do believe that, in our home country now, in the US, I believe in our institutions and their resilience. So I'm not ready to give up, even after January 6th, for example, what happened in our nation's capital and really the assault on our democracy, which was terrifying for all of us. the resilience of our institutions, the resilience of kind of the American spirit, and hopefully the global spirit will walk us through this, and we will be scarred. I won't say we will be unscarred, but I think we have what it takes to look at the dangers facing us and hopefully work together to make our societies healthier, safer, and better.
Dr. Sharon Nazarian, thank you for this today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Really
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
me so much.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. All the best. Bye-bye.
Khodafis.
Khodafis.
Dr. Sharon Nazarian, professor of political science at UCLA and now the senior vice president of international affairs at the Anti-Defamation League. Dr. Sharon Nazarian joined us from Los Angeles, California today. All right, microphone's back on for the fabulous Keon, Groovy Shaya, and Captain Reza. Dr. Sharon Nazarian.
I learned something new today. I always thought Jewish people were grouped into Ashkenazi or Sephardic Jewish, but I had no idea Persian Jewish people had their own.
The
like, what was it?
Mizrahi.
Did
yeah.
you know this?
Well, you know what's funny is I did know about Mizrahi Jews, but I didn't think. I also didn't remember or think that was a third category.
Right.
It was yeah.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that was amazing. One thing that it was quite incredible, and it adds to minorities' hardship when they migrate, was when she was talking about how to behave, learn how to behave in public and what to say, what not to say about your culture and stuff.
The
like
code
that.
language.
The code language.
Yeah.
It was so interesting because I didn't think they would have that back in Iran. A lot of my friends were Jewish, and I would go to their houses and stuff like that. I noticed like they wanted to like offer me certain food, like there would be a little chatter like in the kitchen and stuff. But it never clicked that it might be something like this, like they're trying to, be as conservative and safe as humanly possible. But here, like, I've noticed that, like, we have a lot of things in our culture, like, for example, and like there is this sacrificial like ritual in Iran where you buy a new house, you buy a new thing,
You got to kill an animal.
yeah, you kill an animal,
that.
you put
Or
the
every time I
blood all
visited
over,
Iran, I was
yeah, they do that.
horrifying.
Like, I don't think they do that as much anymore, but like I remember, like I was a little kid, like I was 5 or 6 years old, and I got traumatized actually because like they killed like a little sheep and then put the blood on the tire of the car and stuff.
I'm
because
always
it was-
telling people like, oh no, Iran's not like that, and then like,
I know.
then
But
there'll
that's
be
the-
like a Persian like, actually we killed the goats in the streets,
It
and I'm
was
like,
great.
no, don't say that.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same. I'm like,
No, it's a modern country. Please, Reggie, it's not like that. Well, actually, I killed the lamb myself. No.
Wasn't it your pet? Not anymore. It's lunch
I had
today.
You come visit, we kill a sheep for you. No, please don't kill a sheep.
When my family visited one time, they, of course, every time they cut off a sheep's head, like in the front yard.
Oh my God,
and
yeah.
one time,
Who did that?
I don't relatives.
Your
like
extended family
relatives, yeah.
in
Very
honor of you.
relatives. Yeah, and one time.
Keon's here. Get the sheep. Get little Ahmad the sheep. No, not that bad.
And one time, like they cut off the head, and like it had some life left in
Oh
it.
my
The sheep
God.
like started running towards me.
No.
and,
Oh my
yeah,
God, that's
so I'm
traumatizing.
traumatized.
Well, you see, we
horrible.
let the cat out of the bag now, but generally speaking, I try to hide that.
So what is your point? There was a code language around
Yeah,
that?
there was
Like-
the code language. Like here, when nowadays I don't talk about it as much, and it's more prevalent. Like people know about our culture. But when I recently moved, like a lot of this, like these things, if it were to ever come up, like I would try to be like, oh, I don't know about that. We don't have that really anymore. Like it's like that, and I would just try to pivot the conversation to change the subject. But
Right.
I totally get that code word thing. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the code language living here used to be Persian. Because there were so few Persians around that if my mom wanted to say something to me in the mall or something, she would just speak Farsi, and now you got to be careful.
Now if you wanna
all these Persians around.
Yeah, everybody would
There's
Always
no
got an
code.
ear on you, wondering what you're going to say. I thought it was also interesting, like the question of identity that comes up so often with different guests of ours. You know, when she said, I mean, through all the hardship, like they literally fled Iran. And when I say, oh, but your dad wanted to go back, and you know they didn't have full rights, and she's like, absolutely, you know, Iranian Jews think of themselves as Iranian, you know, that they're very sort of committed to that, and it's
they cannot also they couldn't stay in Israel because they're Iranian. So you know that was sad. So they have to move from Israel.
Yeah. Remember that the guest that we had on very early on in our show, who was
Orly
Noy, but her name is Mujgan, and she changed her name when she went to Israel because to sort of they said you have to change your name, and to kind of cloak the Persianness, you know, to a certain extent. Interesting. Well, I was very grateful to have Dr. Sharon Nazarian on. That was very insightful, and I think that the work that she does, as we discussed in the beginning of the interview, it's just tremendously difficult work. Like to immerse yourself, to make the decision that I'm going to every day be dealing with the difficult news of the world around hatred and that's tough stuff. Thanks to Dr. Sharon Nazarian for coming on. A shout out to Farid Amarioun and York National Realty. York National Realty is based out of Aurora, Ontario, Canada, not too far north of Toronto, and the owner is a guy named Farid Amarioun. This is a boutique real estate brokerage company that provides top-tier service from first-time homebuyers to investors looking for new opportunities in the communities they serve. Farid has also made it his mission to give back to the Iranian community in the diaspora and has supported a number of Persian community events and projects. And this episode of Rook is brought to you with some support from him and his team. A big thank you to Farid Amarioun and York National Realty for all that they do. Go to yorknational.com for more information. yorknational.com. Aren't you buying houses these days, Reza? Go through yorknational.com.
I'm looking into buying a house, hopefully soon. So, but not in Aurora. That's
why you don't have to buy it in Aurora. He's you know, covers the whole area.
They cover full GTA.
Ontario, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Every time I talk to Reza, he's up to some stuff like he's like, oh, I'm buying a new house and I got a new car, and
he's a savvy guy.
Yeah, he's got stuff going on.
I'm a busy man.
Good for him, man. Respect the game.
Respect,
wow.
baby. See,
look at that.
Takes a hustler
This
to
is
know.
Episode 150, and Keon and Reza make up.
You know what? Our week in London, kind of, we bonded actually.
Yeah, we realized that.
I've seen another side of Reza.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very difficult times brings people together. Enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, it was special.
Coming up, Vanecha Roudbaraki from Paris, the great artist, in just a few moments. But first, it's Monday. It's time for Letters of the Week.
Oh, I totally forgot. We haven't done it.
We haven't had letters for 2 weeks, and you forget. You forget your role.
I forgot, man.
All right. So last week we launched the inaugural episode of the Contemporary History of Iran with an episode titled From Shahyad to Azadi. So we had author and professor Dr. Talin Gregor, who joined us to discuss how an iconic monument in Tehran that was a symbol of the monarchy basically in the 70s morphed into a symbol of the Islamic Republic almost overnight. So people wrote to that episode. We have a Cyrus K wrote saying, "Gate of which we can imagine ourselves. Maidan Shahyad 1971. Great episode."
Gate of which we can
imagine ourselves.
Imagine ourselves.
I think that's what Dr. Talin Gregor
said
made a reference
that.
to that. Or something. Yeah.
The gate of which we can imagine ourselves.
Yeah.
Huh.
Like imagine the future and like I remember she said something about that. Yeah. Turaj Khosravi wrote saying, "Such a great direction and chapter you picked. I look forward to listening to the upcoming ones. Thank you and warm hugs from Ireland."
I love that. That's amazing. I mean, it's a nice comment, but I just like that there's a guy named Turaj in Ireland.
Yes. We should have made a trip to Ireland.
Yeah,
I'm telling
so
you.
Close.
Let's make a beeline to Turaj next time.
If I know.
Okay, and then Par Adab wrote saying, I enjoyed listening to this interview. The last question was wonderful. I think you asked, do you think this structure is going to last throughout time?
Oh, yeah.
And she was like, if the Earth
If
survives.
the Earth is still here. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I should have prefaced the question. If we're still alive, if the world is still
Humanity's
exists,
still here.
yeah.
Yeah. And then Sami Bayat wrote saying, thank you for covering this important topic in an innovative and unique way that is unique to Jian Ghomeshi and the team at Rook.
Nice.
Very nice.
That's nice. Thank you, Sami Bayat.
Alfred Weber wrote to us saying, I'm sure the irony of the new name of that tower is not lost on anyone who pauses to consider its real meaning. How many more own goals will Iran kick this century? It's just sad. Great discussion, though.
Interesting.
And it's from a non-Iranian, Alfred Weber.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
You don't think that's an Iranian?
Alfred Weber?
Alfred Weber.
My uncle's name is Alfred Weber.
It probably is. It's like the guy's name is Allah or something. I am Alfred.
Abul
Why?
Faz.
Yeah.
You never know.
Alfred
There
is
are a
Abul
lot
Faz.
of educated Canadians that take interest in
That's right.
Persian history.
That's
so-
true. Yeah.
Or Americans, for that matter. Khob, and then we have Rahman Shamsi Ishkevari.
Not Iranian.
Ishkevari.
Not Iranian.
Yeah,
This guy,
Not
this
this
Rahman, that sounds like a
This is
Swedish guy.
He says, one of the most impressive monuments in the world that is the symbol of our culture and attitude.
You know, it wasn't the point of the episode to talk about the exact nature of the architecture. And I know we've talked about having Hossein Amanat on the show, but I just, I do marvel at what they did with that tower, like incorporating different parts of Iranian history, pre-Islamic and post-Islamic history, and it's amazing, and it's just it really is a glorious monument. I mean, we talked about one of my questions for Dr. Gregor was, well, why didn't they tear it down or abandon it somehow? As when there's a huge regime change or revolution, oftentimes, the new party wants to get rid of the especially something that was made for the monarchy, but it's almost too good. It's too beautiful. The people wouldn't have stood for it, to get rid of it. It's almost like it represents wherever the Iranian people are at. Now it's a place where people gather to protest the current regime, right?
And not only the monument, but also it has a very beautiful gallery and a concert hall underneath the monument. And
Roudbaraki Hall.
No, Azadi.
Azadi Hall.
Yeah. And it's fabulous. It's amazing. Yeah.
I remember you played there, right?
No.
Oh.
No, I think
you weren't allowed to play there. Something like that.
No, I went there for several shows. But but
you got high there. Something. I knew there was some story.
My question is, how did they have the audacity to name it the Azadi Tower? Literally, the complete opposite.
But
of what they
on
stand
some levels, I wish they would have did that with the national flag and also like a national anthem where. Morph it, do whatever you want with it, but at least it exists. Don't tear it down and reinvent the wheel, essentially. Because right now, a lot of the division in our culture and society
is over the flag.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer to how did they have the audacity is that they believe that it was freedom to they're free of the monarchy. That's.
All right, moving on.
You have to see things through the lens of 1979 sometimes.
I wish I could.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're too young, Kia. Youngster.
Yeah, it sucks that the youngsters get to pay the price of the revolution.
That's
right. That pisses me off. We don't get to see the Iran that our parents talk about so highly of. Anyway, moving on. I'm very angry over this subject. Zoya Katuli wrote saying, such a wonderful interview, so informative. It brought back old sweet and sour memories as well. Thank you so much, Jian John and Rook Team. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Zoya.
Very nice. Letter of the week time.
Oh!
All right.
Yeah.
This week it goes out to Amane Goli Khatir.
Oh,
nice
quite
name.
a name.
Yeah.
I know, it's almost as good as Kiandokh.
Almost. Not quite. I'm kidding. It's a beautiful name. She wrote saying, thank you. This program is wonderful. I like it. This is going to be the beginning of an exciting journey. I agree with that.
Yeah. Is it the beginning, Jian?
It is the beginning.
Of an exciting journey.
Oh, it's exciting journey?
Of course. It's the contemporary history of Iran part 1. So,
lovely.
if we make it to part 2, it'll be a journey.
When does the excitement begin? Call me when it starts.
What?
I'm joking.
Wow.
I'm joking. You
All
have to
right.
have the facts.
Wasn't there a song? Amine.
Chishme Tov.
That's how I know that name. Amine.
Okay, it doesn't go like you.
No, I just remember because
like a goat herder.
the only reason I know it actually is because when I was a little kid, my cousin would sing it, and he like a kid, and he was a kid. He'd be like Amine, Amine. That's all I know about the song. I don't think I've ever actually heard it.
Didn't Andy and Kuro sing that
Yeah,
song?
right. Yeah.
It's Agassi. Actually,
Oh, Agassi
the first,
original, yeah,
and it
yeah.
has a parody thing that came after that, which said, "Aynane, aynane, zanam manu mizane."
Oh, so good. What is that? Who did that
I
version?
don't know.
Who
I like
knows?
it. I'm gonna look for that.
All right. That's thank you to Amine for the letter of the week. And thank you, Fabulous Keon. All right. My next guest today is an Iranian-French painter best known for her works as examples of expression and tangible objectivity that are inspired from the world around her. Vanecha Roudbaraki is arguably one of the most renowned Iranian artists of the current era, with multiple international prizes and trophies earned from different countries around the world. She has held more than 100 exhibitions of her artworks in international galleries and salons in Europe, Asia, and North America. But her art remains forever inspired by her roots in northern Iran, where, as she describes it, the forests, mountains, and seaside merge in wonderful and untamed harmony. Vanecha Roudbaraki was born in Rasht and has lived in Paris since 1990, having completed her university studies in mathematics. She says she's always used the philosophy and tools of mathematics to create her paintings. She's also been a consistent activist for human rights and the rights of women in Iran. An image of her work, The Cry for Iran, was carried during the Paris demonstrations in support of the Green Movement in Iran in 2009. And right now, Vanecha Roudbaraki joins me from Paris, France. Hello.
Hello, Jian. Hello, everybody. I am so happy to be with you.
I'm so happy to have you. And I've been told that you've got an accomplice with you. You've got your daughter, Emily, next to you as well.
Yes, she is with me because my English is not good enough. So I need her to,
Your English is fine, but it sounds like Emily's your safety valve, your security guard.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay, well, bonjour, Emily, and thank you for being here as well. Vanecha, your paintings are. I've been excited to talk to you. I mean, your paintings are so vivid, so rich in color, and so deep in their exploration of the natural world. You said you are inspired by the relationship between humans and nature. So let's start there. What captures your imagination about that relationship between humans and nature?
Yes, so I try to, I don't know, it's not translation, but it's my inspiration from the nature and the life in around of me. I can feel that in the nature. I can feel that by the human, by body, but nude, but by nature, by landscape.
But you don't, for example, I mean, when you say you're inspired by the world around you, you don't paint buildings. We don't see that kind of. We see it's more. So it has to be a living thing. Is that what inspires you?
Because the building is not live. They don't have life. It's not alive. I can't. I can't feel the life in the building. It's not my specialty. It don't touch me. you know.
Right.
I just can draw or do painting, the all things that have the life, like nature, like landscape, like the plant, the human, the body, the flowers, the water, the song, mountain, like this.
By the way, any difficulty you have with your English is compensated by the fact that you have that charming French accent. So it's everyone wants that accent. Trust me, everybody wants your accent. It's beautiful. The inspiration of nature, though, it seems quite visceral for you. It's quite direct for you. I don't know if this is still true, but I saw one video footage of you where you have a studio that's located near a forest or in nature, and it's this romantic idea that we have that an artist travels through nature to find peace and inspiration. And I always wonder if that's real or if that is just a romantic idea. Are you really actually inspired by these walks you take, say, in the forest? Does that really translate into painting for you?
Yes. I need to be in touch with nature and with the nature. I need to be there, but of course I can't take with me a big, a huge canvas and go in the forest to do painting. I just go in the forest, in the nature, in everywhere that I feel some things good that I can work with. I can do some things. I go there. I stay many times there. Then I do a small video with me. Always I have with my my telephone, with my mobile, with some things that I can do a small video. Then in my studio, I look after the video that I did, and just I looked at, I stop many times. Then I start my painting in my studio. In that time, I'm not in the landscape, I'm not in the nature, but I translate some things that I feel, that I live in outside.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is that you're an expressionist painter. So even though you're taking the video or the photos, you're not directly painting, masalan, exactly what's in the picture. You're expressing something that you've felt, right?
Exactly. Because I can't draw, I can't paint exactly the same things. If I draw or I paint some things in some artwork, it's just one special point of view, and it's not all of point of view, because we have infinity point of view, and I just have one. Then I have to translate this sensation, this emotion with me, by my body, with my mind, with my all of my element, and then I translate on the canvas. Then when the people look my artwork, they have also them's own point of view, them's own inspiration, and them's interpretation. Interpretation. Yes.
Right. Do you feel like if it's expressionist, if it's a bit more abstract, people can bring their own interpretations rather than if you paint something very specific that there's only one point of view of?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I think abstract is the things that more exact. Abstract painting, abstract artwork is the more exact side of what I see, mathematical. Because I study mathematical, and in the mathematics we have many different dimensions, but us only we can feel and we can see maybe 3 or 4 dimensions. But mathematically we have more than that. So we have many dimensions in our world that we can't, the human can't feel that, can't see them, can't hear, but they exist because mathematically we know that exist. So abstract for me is the more realist, is the more just, is
I
the
get
more
it. I get it. That's you turned it around in the sense that we think of abstract as less realistic, but I understand. I was going to ask you about the combination of mathematics and painting a little later, but now that you brought it up, I think of mathematics as the opposite of abstract art in the sense that it's an exact science, isn't it? Isn't it math? Like you always have to. I mean, it defines itself by math equations. There's only one right answer, masalan. Whereas
but it depends the level of mathematics. If we stay in level in high school, high school, yes. But I speak about the mathematics in high level of mathematics in university and after. I have my older. He's mathematician.
He's a professor, right? He's
a professor of mathematics in university. And one day he was in my studio and he tell me he look after a abstract painting and he tell me, if you know the mathematics to high level, and we have a very important, very huge imagination, and we want to draw the world, it became a abstract painting and never a figurative painting.
Right. That's so fascinating. It's so interesting. Yes. The other thing about nature is, for those of us who grew up outside of Iran. I grew up in England and then in Canada. We don't always think of Iran in terms of its natural beauty. I know that Iran is about that, but I think of Tehran and I think of crowded streets or something. And I come from Canada where, the name of the country conjures up images of mountains or rivers or forests or nature. Tell me about the north of Iran and how that inspired you in terms of nature.
Yes, north of Iran, where I am from, is Gilan. It's so green. You have a Caspian Sea in one side, and another side you have mountain, Alborz, and you have the very beautiful forest. It's really very, very green and so beautiful. You have also the rizière, the rice fields. The last year that I was in Iran, I remember I was so young, and I remember that we visited the mountain, very beautiful forest, and the very, very nice area.
Were you drawing at all? When did you know that you had this ability, that you had this talent to be able to paint?
I just started to draw by myself because I am autodidact. In the class, I draw the professor, the teacher. I loved that, and the children always come in around of me to see what I draw today.
So the other kids knew that you were good at drawing even when you were young?
Yes. Yeah.
I know that you've talked about how, by the time you're finishing your mathematics degree and you're starting to paint, it's the 80s, you're in your 20s, early 20s, and I know that you've talked about being very affected by the Iran-Iraq war that was happening at the time. How did the war affect you?
Oh my God, yes. I know the war very, very good because I live 8 years of my life in this war, from 14 years to 22. And it was just after that I come in France. So, I remember that first of all, I lost 6 of my friends in the war. Yes. Because I was, for 1 year, I was in Luristan University. It was just in the limit of Iraq.
Right.
And when we study in university, we hear all time the
Bombs?
the bombardment, the
Yeah.
bombs, the rocket, and all that. And one morning, I stand up at 6 in the morning with a huge, very huge sound, and they bombard our university, and many students was died. Then they ask the boys, because we was only 3 girls in our promotion, and 27 boys, and they asked them if they want to help our country, because the war, it was very difficult in that moment.
Yes.
And of course all the boys said yes, but they was so young and they never study how to take a arm, and when they go, is the majority was died.
Died, yeah.
And you know, one more thing, Jian. You know, I paint and I draw always the puppies. I
Yes,
don't know.
poppies, yes.
Yeah, puppies. Yeah, puppies. And the puppies for me is in the memory that all of my friends and the students and all the people that I know, and they died very young in this war.
Yeah, I saw some of your paintings of poppies about in remembrance of the war, and it was interesting to me because poppies are what we use here in Canada for Remembrance Day, because of actually Flanders Fields, which is not far from where you are right now. Remembering World War II, people wear the poppies here in Canada. So it was interesting to me that you also use the poppies as a remembrance of the Iran-Iraq War.
Yeah.
You must have been very afraid. یعنی میترسیدی که مثلا اونجا که گفتی توی لرستان بودی که you were close to the front lines of the war. Like psychologically, چجوری مثلا did that affect you?
Psychologically, I wasn't sure to be in life. I don't know that how many times I can be in life, because مرگ خیلی نزدیک بود.
Death felt close to you. You were losing friends. You were
That was so close to me, and that time I understand if I am in life, because it's a miracle.
How did you choose? I mean, how did the decision to finally leave Iran happen, and how did you choose France, or did France somehow choose you?
Something started in me.
Yes.
And I decided to go away, to just go away.
Yes.
When I left Iran, for me, in my mind, it was for survival.
Yeah.
Yes, only survival.
Yeah. So you didn't think you were leaving to go to France to be an artist. You were just leaving to save yourself, and then it turned out that you were an artist.
And when I arrived in France, for the first time in my life, I feel the peace, because when I was child, it was a revolution. Then it was the war in Iran, about 8 years. And I always heard the ambulance, the bombardment, the security with the armed soldiers. I was in a huge tremblement de terre. Earthquake in Iran.
Yes, the Roudbar, right?
Roudbar, yeah. Because I was in Rash, it was not far from Roudbar. it was just after the war. It was 2 months after the war.
Yes, it's a lot of misery. It's true. I mean,
Yes.
we talk about this a lot on this program, and people say, "Well, why do you keep talking about the revolution or the war?" It's because it affected so many people's lives, like those of us who've left Iran for and who live in different countries, like yourself. That said, you've been in France for more of your life than you were in Iran. You've been in France for over 30 years. You are a French artist, but you clearly identify with Iran. Some of your videos that you post, Vanessa, on Instagram, where you're communicating, you do it in a mix of a very fluent mix of English and then French and Farsi, Qatimishan, it's really fun to watch. I mean, in terms of your identity, where's your heart? Do you think of yourself as French now or Iranian, or how do you distinguish?
Yeah, it's a good question. Origin, yeah, I feel Iranian, but I was adopted by a new family, French family. If I wasn't in France, if I don't traveled in France, I never became who I am today.
Right.
And in France, I saw my country better. When you are far, it's like a painting. If you are too close to painting, you can't see all things. But if you take a distance from painting,
yeah,
you look that better. In France, it was the same things for me. I know my country. I study about Iran, Iran civilization, Iran culture, Iran history,
yes,
and everything about Iran.
Let me ask you a bit more about your painting, and then I'm going to ask a bit about Iran before I let you go. Your painting, it really is expression for you. I mean, you speak through your paintings. You've said this, and I'm curious how it asserts itself, Vanessa. Like, if say you're not traveling, say you're at home, and tomorrow you're at home and you don't necessarily, will you only go to your studio if you're feeling it, or will you force yourself to go and sit in front of the canvas to kind of see if something comes out?
Yes, no, I can also draw or do everything in my home if I feel. I'm not, I have everywhere, I have the tool, and I can vote.
But what if you don't feel it? I'm asking if you ever feel an obligation because it's your job, that
I don't want to have obligation because it's my job now. Yes. For this reason, I don't accept the order. It's so difficult to accept.
You don't do commissions. Somebody says
no, you don't. Yes, sometimes it's the exception only for the portrait, because I have somebody that asks me portrait regularly, but not for everybody.
Someone like the Queen of Iran from the Pahlavi era.
Yes.
I mean, I want to ask you.
You know everything.
Of course I do. I want to ask you about, you've posted a few photographs with Farah Pahlavi Diba, the Queen of Iran from the Pahlavi era, and she's been very supportive of you.
Yes.
How did she first hear about you?
I knew her in New York in 2006. When I was invited in Iranica by Professor Yarshater.
Yes.
I gave one of my paintings to Iranica for support Iranica. Then she was there. I stayed near to my painting. I don't move. She was far to me, and from there she asked to Professor Yarshater, who is here, and he said she's a painter, and she said, I want to see she's painting. So she come to close to me. Of course, I present me. She was so cute, elle était très douce, sweet, yeah, so cute. And then she asked me, okay, we take a photo together, but I don't take my camera with me. I take nothing. I said here, I don't have a camera. And she said, well, somebody can take a photo from us. Of course, everybody want to take the photo from us. And she checked all the photo to see if the photo are okay. I was impressed about that.
Yes.
Then she asked my card, and then when she come in Paris, of course, I invited her to my exhibition. Then she started to buy my painting, and she support me. And I have a huge chance to be in contact with her.
Vanessa, tell me about your decision to speak out the way you do against the Islamic Republic. You posted a video in April saying no to the Islamic Republic. I mean, some artists shy away from being political. Do you feel it's your responsibility to speak out?
Yes, I feel, because this is how I learn in France. You know, in France and in many another country, I think in Canada it's like this. The artists have to take the decision about the country, about all of the decision. I can't understand many artists that think the politics is different with the art, and it's better to just do the artwork and do nothing with the politics. But the politics is our life, is our future, is the future of my children, is my country, is my country also. I have to decide for my country. I have to talk with my people. I have to do some things if I see that is injustice. And for me, it's normal, it's natural.
Obviously, it means that you can't visit Iran now, I assume.
It's no problem if I can't visit Iran. For me, Iran is in my mind, in my spirit, in spirit. It's not just because it's geographic, it's a limit geographic, if I can go in this limit geographic or not. Iran is more huge than a geographic limit on the world card.
I like that. You know, you're not the first person to say that Iran, to a certain extent, for many of us, maybe is not. It's a mindset, or it's a place that doesn't have geographical boundaries around it, especially given those who don't want to identify Iran as the Islamic Republic or what it currently is in terms of as a nation state. It's a very interesting thought. Do your I guess I should ask Emily. I mean, what relationship do your kids have with Iran?
I wish I could go there one day, because it seems to be beautiful, and I never went there.
Can you speak Farsi, Emily? And Emily, are you now? I know that your son Vanessa is an assistant professor at University of Strasbourg. I would have asked this of him, but I can ask of you. Are you aware of how cool your mom is, or is she just a mom to you?
No, she's the coolest. Yeah, I'm aware.
Emily, are you also an artist?
Yeah, yes, I am. I mostly do digital art, though. My job is making jewelry, so I guess
okay. So you're creative as well. A final question to you, Vanessa. When you have a popular social media presence, do you hear from people in Iran? Are Iranians aware of you as well as people around the world, in the art world and in France?
Yes, of course. Many. I am in contact with Iranian artists. I support them, and I try to organize many events for the artists, Iranian artists in France. Yes, I am in contact with them.
I very much have enjoyed talking to you. Your art is very inspiring, and I I hope you'll do an exhibition here in Toronto or different places in the world where we can see it, or I'll just have to come to Paris and see it. But it is very inspirational talking to you and the work that you do. I thank you so much for taking the time today. I think your English is just fine, although I really appreciate Emily being with us as well. And I hope we get to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Jian. I hope also to see you soon. Thank
Merci.
you. Merci.
Bye, Emily. Merci.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Khodafis. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Vanecha Roudbaraki, an Iranian-French painter, best known for her works as examples of expression and tangible objectivity that are inspired from the world around her. She's won myriad international awards, and you heard her there with her daughter, Emily. That's Vanecha Roudbaraki, joining us from Paris, France today. And Shai-Jun?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the fact actually that the abstract and mathematics it's amazing.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it. It
really-
blew my mind. And also, shame on me for having such a limited notion of what mathematics should be, a prescribed notion. She's like, no, actually, at a more higher level, mathematics is not as obvious as you think there, Ghomeshi. Thank you, Shaya. Thanks to Captain Reza and the fabulous Keon. This is Full Time for Rook for today. For all things Rook, for our episodes, our funnies, our Rook moments, videos, go to rookmedia.com. rookmedia.com, where you can find it all, including a way to support us through our Patreon program. Just press the Support Us button on the main page there. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. Producer Susan Ponce, the artist, fabulous Keon, Super Patty Saw, Savvy Roham, Alay Mertad, sponsorship Sean, Captain Reza, and Groovy Shaya. Thank you to all of you out there supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe on all or any of our platforms if you've not done so already. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook or other places at Jian Ghomeshi. And in the meantime, as ever, of course, Mizu and Bashi.